We had a friend called Goran who is driving an event business called Hyperite. Then the pandemic happened. We had some examples, I won't name the people, but some failures for sure after the episodes where
Anders Arpteg is an award-winning AI scientist with 25 years at Spotify and the Swedish Security Service. But his podcast wasn't built as strategy. It began as a lifeline for a friend during the pandemic.
I never thought 5 years ago that we would continue for this long, but we've been doing that and enjoy it. So it's surprising, I think, to all of us, but fun. It's surprisingly educational, and that's why it's simply fun and really useful. But not keeping it out free of ads and free of sponsorship has also its values. That means that we have no incentive to be biased in any direction.
When you see tools like Sora 2, what are you thinking when it comes to online content creation?
Yeah, it's a great question, and Sora 2, of course, is...
Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Anders, welcome to Podcast Gurus. Can you please tell us your podcast story?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here and speak about our podcast. It's something we have been doing for like 5 years. It's called AI After Work. The reason behind it was that we had a friend called Goran who is driving an event business called Hyperite, and then the pandemic happened. All the event businesses basically was cancelled, and it was really tough times, for a person that is otherwise working only with events. So we thought, me and Henrik, who are the co-hosts of AI After Work, we thought, we should do something to try to support him and Hyperite during these difficult times. So then we started a podcast, and we are all fans of some of the biggest American podcasts like Joe Rogan's podcast and Lex Fridman, etc. So we thought, why not be inspired by that and start something similar? We thought we would call it AI After Work, and we literally want to have an after work. So the idea was that we simply sit with some friends and have some guests and speak about our passion, which is artificial intelligence. So we are doing that more or less every week, every Thursday evening, and we're going live streamed and no editing, and just right out into the hyper void, so to speak, and speaking with our guests. Been doing that for like 5 years and 170 episodes or something by now.
It's not too bad. Do you have drinks at the same time since it's an after work?
We have a beer or two,
reasonable?
yes. Yeah, we don't go as far as Joe Rogan with whiskey and even stronger things, like when he had Elon Musk on the show and he smoked something.
For instance.
So we don't go that far, but some beers, yes, we usually have.
Having the right inspirations here. Does the conversation around AI and assumptions around AI go stronger and stronger as you get more and more beers in, or does it stay really reasonable? You start talking about AI, it's very serious, and then as beers flows, right, you're like, make more, let's say, bold and imaginary.
It can be nice, for the people that are joining as guests. Sometimes they are a bit nervous, for us having done it so long, then, we just do it and it's not a problem. But yeah, it can be some way to open up for the guests at least. And it usually takes like half an hour sometimes for some of the guests to really become a bit more comfortable and open up. So we do this kind of long form type of podcast where we usually speak about 2 hours. We try to keep it shorter, but we usually fails because we get into one rabbit hole after the other and speaking about, amazing things and fun stuff. But we want to have it long formed. We don't want it to be this kind of traditional like interview style. We rather just, sitting around, having a discussion, and normally start a bit with the background about the person and then going into a main theme that we usually define, and then end up with some rather philosophical topics, which is easier once you have a beer or two in your body, so to speak.
Why the choice of going live every Thursday? Like, why not just recording it and, publishing on the different podcast platforms? Why the choice of going live?
We have, Goran, who is the producer of it, and me and Henrik are usually the co-hosts of it. And we really don't have the time to work with this podcast that much. We want to have a really lightweight, streamlined way of running these podcasts. And, we perhaps prepare half an hour and just doing some research on the person and then just, talking about it. And if we were to have a bit more produced version of it and having to do editing, etc., it would take more time for all of us, which we don't have. So partly it's because we don't have the time, but secondly, I think it also brings a sense of transparency and authenticity for the podcast. So people can know that, this is actually literally what we say. And it works surprisingly well.
So you've published 100 and I had prepared the exact number, 178 episodes in
Oh,
about
really?
5
It's
years.
more than I thought. Yeah.
At least that's what Apple Podcast is saying. What kept you going, right? That's the reason I'm asking this question is the famous metric that I like to share on this podcast is 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3. Of those who do, 90% of them don't make it past episode 20. Publish 21 episodes and you're among the 1% podcast in terms of number of episodes. Doesn't mean audience, but at least, consistency. You've published 178 whilst going live. What's keeping you going?
It's fun. I mean, that's literally one of the important things about the podcast. It's supposed to be an after work. We're supposed to just sit there and speak about our passion, which is AI. And another thing is surprisingly educational. So, I'm a deep tech and a passionate guy about AI and also about, how to scale value from AI in businesses and leadership kind of questions. But this is a passion of ours, and that's why it's simply fun and really useful. I mean, to get this kind of broader view by speaking to the leaders, primarily in Sweden, because we want to, have the recording done physically in the studio, it really brings a broader view and deeper understanding of what the challenges and possibilities are with AI by talking to these people and doing that in a deep, long format style. So primarily because it's fun, but also because it's surprisingly educational and useful.
I like the lesson here. Like, in order to keep going, you need to keep it fun. The recommendation I give to people who want to start a podcast, right, in terms of number of episodes, is whatever number you're comfortable sustaining for a long period of time, right? It's like going to the gym. It's not going to be of use if you go 10 times a week for a month and then you just stop because you injured yourself or whatever reason that came up. So something that will make it sustainable. And you're doing that very well with podcasts just by keeping it fun. That's an interesting thing. So
I never thought, 5 years ago that we would continue for this long, but we've been doing that and enjoy it. So it's surprising, I think, to all of us. What's fun.
Here we go. One thing that is very interesting about your podcast, Anders, is that you keep on going without having even a business behind it or a monetization aspect to it. Can you speak a bit more about this? Like, did you have some opportunities that you didn't take, or how come? Like, how come that you've published close to 200 episodes by now, purely for fun?
Of course, we could have taken in sponsorship, and we have a lot of people and companies that would be able to do so. Our producer, is working in this event business, so he's doing that every day, and it's his living. But keeping it out free of ads and free of sponsorship has also its values. That means that we have no incentive to be biased in any direction, and then since it's rather lightweight in terms of time that we have to spend into it, etc., we can still keep going without having, a big monetary impact from it. So I think it's rather nice to not have to listen to all the ads and the sponsorship messages that you'd otherwise have to listen to many other podcasts. And I'm really glad that we've been able to continue to do that without taking in that type of money.
Is that something that, because obviously AI is all the hype, right? When you started in 2020, ChatGPT didn't come out yet. I think was it 2021 or 2022? Oh my God.
22 in November, when the
22.
ChatGPT application and GPT 3.5 was released, yes.
Right. Thank you for this. That's the interesting thing, right? When this came out, you were already 2 years in the making of an AI-focused podcast. So given the context and given everything going around AI right now, you were in the perfect position to build the business out of it and to make money out of it. So that's really interesting that you made the decision of not doing that. What were some of the main challenges that you faced launching, publishing, and staying consistent with the podcast?
Well, to get people to come physically to the office or to the studio that we do have, that's sometimes a challenge. And we could have, of course, brought in more high-profile people if we simply did it online. We did a number of episodes online as well, but it's really not the same thing. And I really do appreciate that we're trying to meet people physically in person for the podcasts. So that has been a challenge sometimes to to get people to be able to come physically to the studio that we do have. Besides that, it's always an interesting challenge to see who we should bring on. We had some examples, I won't name the people, but some failures for sure out of the episodes where it didn't turn out well, but in most cases it has. So that's always interesting, who should you really bring on? And after a number of years, you start to become, have more expertise in this and can know, who you should not bring on. But still, that's been one challenge for sure. Another big challenge is that both me and Henrik sometimes love to speak about this, and we often end up in rabbit holes and go down into discussions that we should really keep much shorter. But once again, we're doing this for fun, and if we were to have it too strict a format where we're not allowed to jump around and speak about rabbit holes, then it wouldn't be as fun. But still, I think especially Henrik has a tendency sometimes to jump around into this, and we try to keep into some kind of strict topics. So we want to keep discussions into these kind of 5-10 minute snippets, if we call it that we later could potentially publish separately, but we usually fail with that. So we usually, and me, of course, as well, is going into rabbit holes and speaking about things that is taking far too long. But, that's also the reason behind the podcast. It should be an after work. We go where the discussion takes us. And that's fun. But also a challenge.
Agreed. And I mean, back to the names that you mentioned at the beginning of this interview, right? When you look at the biggest podcasters out there, I think they come prepared, but the conversation itself is very flowing, is very conversational. Like Joe Rogan will literally sit through a 3 hours recording and just go wherever the conversation takes them. And he's interviewing worldwide experts, right? So obviously there is some substance here to extract from the guest, but keeping the podcast very conversational is what makes the magic of the channel, in my opinion.
And that's also what the long format really, should bring. I mean, it takes some time for people to open up, and you need to come into some kind of discussion before we can get into the interesting parts. So I think the long format has some really strong advantages, but also some challenges in listening to it. I mean, who really listens on 2-hour podcasts? Some people certainly do, but for some people, they want to listen to 5-10 minutes snippets. So that's both pros and cons, so to speak.
All right, talk to me about AI. So what's happening in AI right now? What's going to happen in the next 2-3 years, in your opinion, right? You've been having a discussion around this every single Thursday evening. So what can you tell me about AI? And if we can tie this to podcast, that'd be even better.
Yeah, but I've personally been working with AI for over 25 years. So I'm an old guy in the game, so to speak. And it's certainly, if you've seen this kind of exponential increases in functionality and capabilities of AI, it's certainly very much true now that it's going faster and faster in terms of what AI can do. And if we look a couple years ahead, we had a number of major developments in AI. I usually speak about the old times when we have expert systems and this kind of symbolic logic, and we have that type of AI where they have to manually encode everything to make it work, and it was super hard and didn't scale, and it didn't really produce any kind of proper intelligence at all. And then we got some machine learning, and then you can automate the process of that, so you can actually just train a system using data, and that was a big impact. And then you had deep learning, meaning you could also work with more unstructured data, and that really opened up to new use cases that were never possible before. But then I think, when it comes to generative AI, which is the latest wave here, I think a lot of people don't understand or are perhaps focusing on the wrong part when it comes to generative AI. And for me, of course, it's fun that you can generate things with generative AI, but AI has been able to do that for a really long time. I think, the big value maker, so to speak, with generative AI is rather the generality of it. So meaning, it's trained on a very simple general objective, meaning predict next token, for example, or a patch in an image. And by training it on a very, very simple objective like that, it actually becomes super general and has to understand, learn a lot of tasks by doing so. So the big value provider from generative AI, as I see it, is rather that you can very, very quickly, without even fine-tuning it in many cases, adapt it to new use cases in an organization or for people. So that is the big value maker, and that is, I think, what people should understand and use it for. So that is going to continue. But then if we look in coming years, I think another thing that, or a lot of people gets wrong today, what AI can do and what it can do in 2-3 years, is they don't speak about what AI is bad at. And a lot of people simply say AI is better or worse than human, but they don't say for what. And I think you need to break it down a bit here. And one way to do that I really like is to use the OpenAI AGI pyramid. So OpenAI has published this kind of pyramid with 5 levels that AI should be able to do to be proper AGI level. So AGI as artificial general intelligence. And of course, we're far from it yet. But I think that actually is a nice way to visualize and think about what AI can do today and what it cannot do, and then think of what it can do in 2-3 years. So what it can do today is the first level of this pyramid. And the first level is, they call it conversational. I would call it more knowledge management. So AI today is really good in understanding a huge amount of data, like text or images or audio. So, I mean, an example of that is you can simply put like 10 books into the prompt of Gemini and it can read it in seconds and have more or less perfect memory recall from all the content in all these books. And what human could ever do that, right? So in terms of that type of knowledge management skills, it's actually significantly better than humans already for that type of tasks. But then the next level here is called reasoning, and then you have these kind of autonomous or agentic tasks. And if you take reasoning, a lot of people believe, and I disagree with that, but a lot of people seems to believe that AI is really good at reasoning, and I do not see that. It certainly has a shallow form of reasoning, no question about that. And all the reasoning models coming out since, 01, 03, R1, and that, all the Geminis and of course GPT-5, etc., had reasoning capabilities, but it's far inferior compared to humans. One example of that is, if you take playing chess as an example, it's really hard to tell if a person, a human, is really good in memory and memorizing all the positions you have to play, and in that way being good at playing chess, or if the person is actually reasoning, meaning thinking through the number of steps that you could take from this position. And we know Magnus Carlsen in Norway, he's extremely good in memory. He can recall so many games in the past and use that. So this is really amazing. And it's easier for an AI system that is this amazingly good in memory to be fooled thinking it actually does reasoning. But it does, a shallow form of reasoning. In every, token you have in context window, and in the context window, and every layer you have in these, super big models, of course, add a form of reasoning, but it's really bad. But that will change. In 2-3 years, we will see AI being able to reason much better than we can today, and that will be a game changer. And then, the third level, and I can stop after that, but the third level is the agentic part, meaning being able to take action in some way or form. This is something that I think people are abusing the term agent in extreme ways. Of course, we can have AI systems that take action today, that do web search or change code or write code or do different tasks. But the only way it can do that is if we manually program it to do so. So if we build an API that is specifically built for the AI, or build this kind of MCP server that is specifically built to help the AI to take action, then it can do it, yes. But you would never have to do that for a human. So we still have a long way to go before AI can really take actions autonomously. And this is the point with layer 3. It should be able to autonomously take action. And we actually cannot do that, I would say, today, only in a very, very shallow way. But in 2-3 years, we probably can. And that will be a big, big change. And that is when potentially, as Sam Altman called AGI, or define AGI, he basically says that AGI will happen when you can be on par with an average level human coworker. We certainly cannot that today, but in 2-3 years, we're starting to get there, and that will be interesting time.
Interesting or scary. I don't know if you saw,
yes.
so the moment we're recording this episode is the 3rd of October, 2025. And Sora 2 just made announcements everywhere. Because when we think about podcasting, right, and like digital media, digital marketing, it's about producing high quality, authentic content that you can repurpose a bit everywhere. When you see tools like Sora 2, like what are you thinking when it comes to online content creation? What is it that for that specific niche AI cannot do that we podcasters must double down on to make sure that we stay ahead of AI, or at least we're not trying to compete with an entity, dare I say, that is impossible to compete with?
It's a great question. And Sora 2, of course, is amazing. And the way it can create content, video and audio in that way is really amazing. And it's so fun to play around with, and what you can do is really cool. And also the new Cameo feature, that enables you to put in yourself or someone that has, authenticated oneself into the video is super cool. So many cool things with Sora 2 for sure. But still, if you think about it, it's still on level 1 here. I think that's an interesting thing to consider here, because it is basically, I read a lot of different videos and audio and text, and in that way being able to understand what you should create in terms of the video, given the prompt that you have. Then the question is, can it reason? And these are one of the more advanced models, of course. So you can think, can it reason according to laws of nature? It's surprising how well it can, for example, handle fluid water, for example, and how they can seem to predict how the laws of nature works, which is surprisingly well. So it is interesting that you can learn these kind of laws of nature by simply training on it. Otherwise, you have to do these kind of Navier-Stokes kind of super difficult partial equations to be able to solve it. And it can simply learn that from data. And that's really cool. But it has some form of reasoning in that sense, but it's still very shallow. And then, of course, it can't really take action at all right now. So it's still on level 1 mainly. And that's interesting, right?
It is 100%. So what's your take on what we should do, right? And again, I know there is a gazillion thing that we should be scared about from AI, and that we're not going to be able to control and so on. I'm just trying to, pick your brain on that one thing. The analogy that I like to take is Jeff Bezos, right? When he was building Amazon, he was not asking himself what's going to change in 10 years or what's going to be the next innovation in 10 years, because I think, especially with AI, we have absolutely no idea of the speed at which AI can evolve and do stuff.
Yeah.
So it's very hard right now to predict what's going to happen in 10 years. What Jeff Bezos was doing when he was building Amazon, it was asking himself, what is true today that will stay true in 10 years? That we should double down on? Well, people are still going to want fast shipping. They're still going to want large amount of choices, ideally cheap ones, and they're still going to want great customer service. So if we double down on those aspects, we're going to win in 10 years. In podcasts, from your experience, and you've been doing this for half a decade, what is it that we should double down on?
It's interesting when you consider interesting tools like Notebook LM from Google that enables you to create a podcast with really nice discussions with two people, discussing with each other about the topic that, you simply send in some document and it can seemingly do a podcast potentially really well. And then the question becomes, what will the podcasting be as it is today? I think still, the reasoning part is really what people does better than AI, and that will continue for some time, not forever, but for some time. And being able to have that, understand the human aspect of things is still interesting. It's like, playing chess. We know that AI is much better in playing chess, but we still watch humans playing chess, and humans still find it fun to play chess. And I think also in podcasting, that will also always be the case, that you want to hear a specific person's point of view on things. And that's what you should really try to keep at, to make it clear that this is connected to some person. We have some kind of understanding who it is. So it's important to also describe, who is the person now joining the podcast, so we can have this kind of connection to the person, to the human, and have the human touch, so to speak. So I think that's important also in 10 years when it comes to podcasting.
I like that. And that's obviously what we always fall back into with podcasting, I feel, is that human connection, right? That conversation, this authenticity that we have when we do lives, but also with the podcast. I'm just very curious to see when AI is going to be able to replicate properly, right? Storytelling, and create people, fictional characters that are going to be, so looking so real that we're going to be able to relate to them, identify to them, and so on. We're not there yet, but I feel that's what may be happening at some point.
Yeah, it's a lot going to happen there. But I think, an interesting question sometimes is how companies should approach AI. And I think, that's such an interesting topic. And podcasting, but how should companies do this? That is something that is very important to me, because so many companies are failing by trying to find value from AI. And that's a shame, because I believe we can easily see there is a huge potential in finding value from AI. And it's easy to see the big, hyperscalers. They, of course, are very high in AI maturity. And as Google said in 2015, they're going AI first, meaning AI is going to be part of every product and services and the way of working that they have. And it's been super successful for them. As for the other, top 10 most valuable companies in the world, which are more or less all of them hyperscalers. That's an interesting, question to ask. How can we as a company that is not a hyperscaler still find value? And why are 95%, as the recent MIT studies said, failing in finding value from AI, right?
Anders, this was a great masterpiece on how to leverage AI. Well, how to not necessarily leverage AI, but how to think about the changes that are going to happen in AI and how to implement this in podcast and how to differentiate potentially. If people want to find out more about you, see what you do, or listen to your podcast, where should they go?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Anders Arpteg. They can also find the podcast if they search for AI After Work Podcast, and you will have a domain called aiafterworkpodcast.com. You can find more information there and connect to me on LinkedIn. And reach out if you have any questions.
We'll put all the links in the description. And thus, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.